hard for me to say some of these are definitively worse than others. Typically going to be paying up to almost 50%. Typically they compete to be the highest taxes in the world, are probably the best tax collectors in Europe. Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to discuss a fun topic, which is the worst countries in the world for tax. And so this is going to include a variety of different criteria related to just plain how bad the taxes are, to how aggressive and quality the tax departments in those particular countries are. So these are places you probably don't want to be involved in their tax net. And so let's dive in and discuss it. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell if you would like help paying the lowest legal amount of tax possible, figuring out how to build the best international structure for yourself, relocate abroad, do all these other fancy things to get your tax rate as low as possible, your actual tax paid as low as possible, and keep the most money in your pocket. We can help you figure out the best solution as well as implement it. Please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or you can send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so starting in no particular order, it's hard for me to say some of these are definitively worse than others, but let's just start with the criteria. So first of all, places that have high tax, clearly. But not just high tax, more like taxes that are difficult to deal with. Okay, so there are some places where, for example, Canada's not on this list. Okay, Canada's not an example of one of the places with the worst tax. Tax rates are quite high in Canada, but the international tax system works fairly well, and so that's pretty attractive. So it's not one of the places that I would throw into the worst tax list. On the other hand, there's some places where we have the opposite. The taxes might be high and it might not even be easy to get around them from a legal standpoint, but the tax departments are really not on the ball. So we're looking for places that have, I guess you would say, 3 or 4 criteria. One is like tough tax rules with high taxes, because you could have tough tax rules with low taxes and that would be fine, right? You could have, on the other hand, a tax department which is really diligent about their policing, and then there's ones that when maybe they're diligent but they're not assholes, and then there's ones who are assholes. And so there's some, we have to kind of look at how aggressive are they, like how kind of just, let's call them assholes, are they in terms of their approach, just not understanding, not helpful, etc. Versus how good are they at what they do. Okay, so we're going to talk about those things. And mainly we're working for places that are both good at what they do and not friendly people to deal with, in the sense of like they're going to be hyper aggressive and they have rules where the rules are difficult to get around and the taxes are high. So I've talked about one of these and I will say it again, Australia. Australia is certainly one of the worst countries to deal with. I always say if you're in Australia, make sure you're doing everything 100% by the book and be aware that the book is really aggressive and hard to get around. Like there are 4 anti-deferral regimes for trusts in Australia. Their corporate residency rules are some of the toughest to work around anywhere in the world. They basically don't offer the ability to repatriate income tax-free. So these are all things, but on top of this, the ATO are really aggressive to deal with, and they're actually really effective as tax collectors. So kind of that combination, as well as the fact that Australian taxes, I mean, you're typically going to be paying up to almost 50% in most cases, not really a great place to deal with. So Australia is definitely one of them. This is, again, as I said, in no particular order. Next, Germany. So Germany, not friendly tax departments at all, relatively aggressive in terms of their particular approach, and so not good. Also pretty good at what they do, and the tax rules in Germany are not easy to work around. They tend to be pretty aggressive. So for example, it's not easy to become non-resident of Germany, just like it's not easy to become non-resident of Australia. So that's number 2. The next one that we have to consider is France. France is horrific, terrible, very very bad to deal with. The French are, again, like, their rules are very encompassing, very tough, very, yeah, just not good for interacting with at all. So highly recommend avoiding France from a tax standpoint. The taxes can be super high. Even how high it looks, it's typically higher than that because they layer on a bunch of other taxes. So I've done some videos on this in particular. And so yeah, not a good thing with France. So that's 3. Number 4, Denmark. Denmark is pretty crazy. And so again, like, some of these countries, they're pretty good at what they do. And Denmark would be one of them. And Danish taxes are, typically they compete to be the highest taxes in the world, and that doesn't make it particularly friendly. Their taxes are not particularly easy to work around. So for example, if we look at their management and control rules, their management and control rules are not based, like most are, in top-level management. It's day-to-day management, which is a much more difficult standard to work around from a kind of practical perspective. So not good. The last one is probably a toss-up. It's difficult to say. I would suspect that people are going to think that I would say the U.S. I would not actually put the U.S., although I'm going to come back to them in a moment. I would likely toss it up probably between Sweden, which is pretty tough, and Netherlands. Now the Dutch, they're extremely good at what they do. On the other hand, they do have some favorable rules in their system, so that's maybe a little bit more viable. The Swedish are also, pretty good at what they do, and have higher taxes typically than the Dutch, and so it's a little bit of a toss-up. But I would think I would typically say Sweden, because the Netherlands has often been a place that has been a little bit more friendly in that regard. Now, some places that people might think that I should have put on there that are not would be places like Spain. Why is Spain not on there? The Spanish are aggressive, but they're not that good. So their rules are not great, but they're not that good at enforcing. So hence they fall lower down in being the worst tax system. Another one might be Italy, kind of a similar sort of deal. You could throw Finland in there. You can, a bunch of these types of countries. Then we have the U.S., which is probably the biggest one people would expect. I actually don't have such terrible experiences dealing with the U.S. A lot of people are very afraid of the IRS. The IRS, I wouldn't say that the IRS are either better or more aggressive than a lot of these. Like, I find the ATO is much more aggressive than the IRS are. The difference is that the IRS has a much longer reach than the ATO does. So that's kind of the trade-off in this regard, is the IRS just can get you pretty much anywhere, sort of thing, which is not to be said for a lot of these others. Obviously, the big challenge for the IRS or for the US as a place is the citizenship-based tax, and the fact that GILTI tax is extraordinarily difficult to get around. So that puts you in sort of a rough spot. But on the other hand, for local Americans, they have Puerto Rico, they have some outs that some of these other places do not have. So yeah, my 5 would be Australia, Germany, France, Denmark, and Sweden. So anyway, curious to hear what you guys would have thought they would be. Put them in the comments below, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.